So we're a SaaS-based enterprise architecture, enterprise scalable software company, and we're leveraging blockchain, the Internet of Things, IoT, and sensors to capture asset and inventory data throughout the supply chain. We see the opportunity for better tracing, tracking, and visibility through the whole supply chain to improve efficiency, to give proof of sustainability, to give proof of ESG, environmental, social, and governance compliance, to give proof of many different event-driven data points, timestamp, date, smart contracts, chain of custody, authenticity. These things don't exist in a lot of supply chains today. Well, there's enormous regulatory and government compliance demands. In agriculture and food products, the FDA is heavily involved in increasing tracing, tracking, and visibility. In another target market, pharmaceutical, we can see with the vaccine and COVID, there's temperature sensitivity. There's a Drug Supply Chain Securities Act, which is kind of at a macro level. There's demands to get to a micro level, to actual dose ID information. Some of that is being self-regulated by the industry. And then in healthcare, the whole concept of dock door to dock door, we have to track and trace these things. We have to show the chain of custody. And today, a lot of that doesn't exist. We believe our technology addresses that demand. So it starts with regulatory compliance, but it evolves to self-regulation, consumer safety, and so on. Well, the agriculture market has not really been addressed, and cannabis in particular is all new. It's legal in certain countries. There have been different regulatory bodies that have weighed in on that in different countries. It's done differently around the world. In the United States, cannabis, for example, is still federally illegal. So there's no federal oversight. There's no EPA regulations for pesticides. There's no FDA regulation for consumables. So we see this as an area that has been long coming and needs to be addressed. We think our technology platform can help agriculture from farm to table, from seed to shelf, and all points in between. If somebody is going to consume something, it has to have tracing, tracking, visibility, proof of sustainability. If a food company claims that they're carbon neutral, or carbon negative, you have to track your carbon footprint. How do you know what your carbon footprint is if you're not tracking that whole supply chain and your carbon consumption throughout that supply chain? So we see ourselves as a big data company. We're going to capture this event-driven data as it happens with these sensors. We use many different kinds of sensors, accelerometers, temperature control, GPS, location elements, many different sensors that we can capture data from. And all of this can be automated through the Internet of Things. I brought some sensors with me. There's a sensor that could be a sticker. There's sensors that are smart labels. You can see that the label has the sensor inside it. It can be even as small as a sensor on a business card. So the form factor of these sensors has evolved over the years. It's not just RFID, it's many different kinds of sensors. And we believe in the food chain, customers want to know, where did this come from? What was the origin? And so we're excited about providing a lot more efficiency to the various companies in the food chain. So imagine the food chain is like links on a bicycle. One link only touches the link before or after it. We want to be the sprocket that touches all the links so that you can see all the companies that are connected in that. For example, you may have had a bowl of cornflakes this morning. You don't know where that corn was grown. In fact, the brand may not even own the cornfield, and they may just buy it on the open market, on the spot market. So we want to track where that corn came from, where it was grown. We want to capture all that information. How long was it on the road? What was the temperature on the road? And of course, all the testing, microbials, heavy metals, pesticides, all of those things go into it. And from our view, companies spend a lot of money on that. So if you claim it's organic corn, then prove it. And if you can prove it, you've got the data. Let's show that data. Let's expose that data in a positive way, because I'm willing to pay a premium as a consumer for organic products because I know it's good for my body. So ultimately, we see consumers attaching to brands that share the value system that they have. So I love this brand because of the following things. And our technology platform can give the proof, can trace and track that throughout the supply chain. You can't help but first start with a little bit of the legal side and the historical side. So just looking at North America, Canada, the United States, and Mexico, the cannabis sativa plant is broken down into many different genetic strains. For purposes of this conversation, to keep it fairly high level, we call that marijuana and hemp, or industrial hemp. And the difference between the two is the amount of THC, and that varies by country. So in Canada, they're both legal nationally. In the United States, marijuana is illegal, but hemp by the Farm Bill of 2018 is nationally legal. And in Mexico recently, both are legal. So from a legal framework, every country has different rules and regulations, and we think Spotlite360's technology platform can help all those with whatever demands they have today and as those rules change. Now, if we drill down a little bit more into the supply chain of the cannabis sativa plant, there are different supply chains based on industrial hemp and marijuana. And we see outdoor grows, we see indoor grows, we see greenhouses, all of which have different demands. And if you start at the very beginning, so imagine a seed and soil, and the soil has water and fertilizer. All those things have to be tested and traced and tracked. There are soil tests and water tests, none of which, in our view, today are well traced and tracked and have visibility across that supply chain. Spotlite360 can address that. But the plant grows, and as the plant is harvested, there are many tests that take place to look at the level of THC, whether or not it's industrial hemp or psychoactive marijuana. It's tested for hundreds of cannabinoids and terpenes, all of which can be chemically extracted from the biomass. And so in a simple way, the next step of this supply chain is taking the plant and extracting the oil. And that happens in many different products around the world today. Some of that research has carried over. You can imagine lavender flowers for perfumes or cosmetics. But in general, the oil is extracted through many different methods. Again, in the United States, because marijuana is illegal, all of that is not under a federal umbrella of the EPA. There are processes that use CO2 or butane or food-grade ethanol. There are many different practices of separating the oil from the plant. When it's separated, it's known as crude oil. That can be refined into distillate or isolate. It can be remediated. It can separate out the cannabinoids, all of which now have to be traced and tracked from the original plant. So our view is we can track that all the way through as the state of the product changes, and obviously the volume, the weight, the water loss. And there are different uses for different parts of the plant. There are a lot of people doing research to use the byproducts, the stalks, the fiber for concrete or for clothing or a variety of other intended products. There are other organics that are extracted through that process, various waxes that could be used for candles or soaps. So there are many byproducts that come out of this, but the next stop in the supply chain is generally some kind of a manufacturing, co-packing, maybe it's private label, maybe it's actually a brand, but the oils can go into many different forms, and both marijuana and hemp could turn into a gummy, an edible, shatter, wax, or even smokable flower. There are many different products that can come out of all that. So we view our technology platform as a vehicle to trace and track as it changes state, and then ultimately when it gets packaged and sold to a consumer, we want to address this public safety element, as I mentioned previously, using QR codes and giving consumers visibility into the supply chain so that they can trust the brand of where it came from. And again, across North America and even across the world, all these regulations will vary dramatically, and we think that we can be this common connection for tracing, tracking, visibility, sustainability for all these genetic strains, all these different forms, all the way through the supply chain, and support the label claims. We view ourselves as the proof. We're the proof of the supply chain. Well, imagine a world where the consumer package has a QR code on the package. So many people have gotten familiar with QR codes through COVID at a restaurant to see a menu or to get some data. We envision that the consumer can use their smart device to scan a QR code on any package. We hope that that becomes viral and that consumers demand that. Now, that QR code can take them to our cloud-based data that we've captured through the supply chain, and the consumer can effectively Google in a generic term. They can query the supply chain to get information about that product, where it came from, how it was made, and address all these issues that in agriculture are real. They're tampered with, their authenticity, their label claims. If for example, the package claims that this product is kosher or halal, you could see that by going through the QR code to our cloud, and you could meet your rabbi, the one that blessed that product, and you could see their bio. In fact, you could see a TikTok-like video of that whole process, and they can connect with their rabbi on some social media platform, and now I have attached myself to the brand. Some things are more critical to certain people: gluten-free, cross-contamination, good manufacturing practices, non-GMO. All of these claims can now be seen by the consumer. So we talked a minute ago about the supply chain and the ecosystem of partners that pass a baton in creating the product. Now it goes the other way for the consumer to see into that supply chain. And if a company spends enormous money and corporate resources, effort, people, time to do something, to be sure that it's ethically sourced, that there's no child labor, that it came from international sources or agriculture practices like organic. Organic is complicated. It's a soil test, it's a water test, it's a seed test. All of these things can be exposed to the consumer to attach them to your brand, to give them value. And so it takes out of the equation authenticity, a fraud, a tampering, theft. All these things can now help the consumer have confidence in the brands that they're loyal to. Well, it's imperative that companies evolve their supply chain. We see that every day in the newspapers and in the media. Supply chains are troubled nowadays, and there are many, many issues across the supply chain. People have become a lot more aware of that. From a company perspective, and from many companies in the ecosystem that pass this baton, they have to evolve. They have to change. It's imperative that they build a digital supply chain as a digital twin to their physical supply chain so that they can track and trace and have visibility and proof of sustainability through these things. For example, there are sensors that can monitor how long something sits somewhere idle, not moving. So it measures movement or lack of movement. So if it's sitting somewhere for too long, the sensor can give a notice, an email or a text or a whole variety of different SMS links to tell somebody to escalate something that this is delayed in somewhere in the supply chain. It could be in your warehouse, it could be in your manufacturing, it could be in the field. But now we're starting to measure things like, what is the delay time of something in the supply chain? And let's address that. If it's perishable, like a food product or agriculture, that costs real money. The loss of food by our research, waste, is some 60% of food. It's a $1 trillion opportunity worldwide for us. So companies are going to have to evolve, and we see our technology and the future of our technology as a very significant opportunity to help that problem.